himself time to heal. At this point, the clumpy discharge is coming out of Kimura's eyes as well, and he sneezes once again. This time, a large chunk of something flies out, and it looks like brain matter. Disturbed and panicking, Kimura climbs out of his apartment while the mucus flows from his face. He sees his neighbor and asks her to call an ambulance, but she just looks scared and goes inside of her apartment. Kimura's head collapses onto the ground, and his face softens as his brains pour out of his mouth. A week passes, and Kimura seems to be alive and entering his apartment, but we can't see his face. His neighbor sees him and looks absolutely horrified. Inside, he gets a call from the doctor checking in on him and seeing how he feels. He says he's in tip-top shape, and we finally see his face, where there are dozens of snails poking out of his mouth, eyes, and ears, as if his head is the shell. Back at the doctor's office, we see that he and his nurse look exactly the same, as if they too are being consumed by the snails. Yuma finishes.
Imagine being able to build an app with your name on it, just by thinking about it. Meet Base 44, a complete AI creation platform. Describe what you want, and watch it take shape. You can plan, customize, and expand in any direction. From tools built for one, to platforms ready for many. From passion projects to enterprise-grade systems. Everything is built in and ready to launch. It's a new world of creation, where you can go as far as your imagination takes you. Can you imagine it? Let's make your dream a reality, right now.
I put curing hepatitis C on my today list.
Epclusa treats all types of chronic hepatitis C with a 98% cure rate. Epclusa is one pill once a day for 12 weeks. If you've had hepatitis B, it may flare up and cause serious liver problems during and after treatment. Tell your doctor if you've had hepatitis B, liver or kidney problems, HIV, and all medicines and supplements you take. Taking amiodarone with Epclusa may cause a serious slowing of your heart rate. Most common side effects include headache and tiredness. Ask your doctor about Epclusa today.
Finishes up the story as he gets ready, and someone yells for him to hurry up. He says goodbye and that he has a picnic to go to. Story 11. Mr. Poke. Yuma comes into his room soaking wet, saying he forgot his umbrella and had to run home in the rain. But that doesn't stop him from getting right into the 11th story. An office worker named Osawa is working late into the night and is the only person in the office. The ticking clock on the wall is driving him crazy, so he calls up the building security to see if they can remove it. The security guard says it's actually a good thing he has it up, otherwise it could be dangerous, on account of Mr. Poke. Curious, Osawa bites, and the guard tells him the story of a businessman who worked in the building. After being only a couple of minutes late to an important meeting, he was fired, and that night he hung himself on the clock post outside the building. Since then, he appears around the building at night asking for the time. Osawa laughs it off, assuming he's just messing with him, but before he hangs up the phone, the guard warns him. If Mr. Poke asks for the time, he needs to give the correct answer. Osawa gets back to work until he gets a call from someone asking him the time. He says 1:25 a.m. and the person hangs up. This is enough to really spook Osawa, but fear's a good motivator, and he finishes up his work just before 2. Just as he's shutting down his computer, he hears a noise coming from the other side of the room, and suddenly a shadowy figure peeks up from the other side of his desk, asking for the time. Osawa is efficiently terrified, but keeps cool enough to say the correct time, 1:57. The figure then disappears, and at this point, Osawa bolts out of his office and towards the elevator. He watches over his shoulder, and when the elevator finally opens, he hears a ticking noise. Mr. Poke is waiting in the dark, asking for the time. Osawa screams and takes the stairs instead, until finally he's made it out of the building. He sighs in relief until he once again hears a ticking noise and realizes he's standing in front of the clock post. Behind him, in a very disturbing image, is the man still hanging and asking for the time. And that wraps up story 11. Yuma lets out a sneeze and blows his nose. It seems he may be getting a real cold now. Someone yells at him from the hall about soaking the floor and walking around in wet clothes. Story 12. Candy Shop. Yuma takes a break from his homework in order to tell the 12th story. Some school kids are disappointed to find that their local candy shop has closed down. One kid in particular says he was worried about the old man who owns it. Just before he walks away with everyone else, there's a clatter and the shutters on the shop rise up a bit. Curious, the kid peeks in and sees all the candy left inside. With no one watching, he can't resist and climbs in. Assuming all these treats will go to waste anyway, he throws some in his bag, but before he can leave, the shutters close and he can't lift them back up. Walking into the dark from the back room, the owner calls out asking who's there, and soon the old man makes his way to the kid holding a power drill. For some reason, the boy says he's sorry, this was all a mistake, and the old man, his eyes bulging, simply asks the boy to follow him. I guess thinking he can get away with it, the boy zips his bag up without giving the candy back, and the candy man sits him down on a stool across from his desk. He's not mad at the kid and actually thanks him. He's been coming to his shop since he was a baby after all, and is touched that he stopped by the shop despite it being closed now. The boy is curious why it's closing exactly. The sign said it had something to do with the owner's health, but the old man says it isn't really his health. It's because of shoplifters. All he wanted was to run a store that kids dreamed of, but he can't make a living with all the theft. At this point, the kid is sweating, considering he just pocketed a few sweets himself. The old man seems a little crazy and says that if he could catch some of these thieves in the act, he would force them to eat a special candy he made from nails, glass, and dead bugs. My God. He takes it further by saying he'll make sure they never eat again by drilling holes through their mouths and stomachs. And we can even see 2 dummies that he was practicing on. I guess that explains the drill. His face all distorted, the old man asks if the kid knows who's doing it. Visibly scared now, he says no. Broken down into tears, the old man apologizes for keeping him so long and says that the kid can leave out the side door. Right before he leaves, the kid feels too much guilt and starts crying as he pulls the candy he took from his bag. He tells the man he's sorry and offers it back. Kind of reminds me of the scene at the end of Willy Wonka when Charlie returns the everlasting gobstopper. Only this story goes a different direction. The old man thanks him for being honest, but says it's too bad he can't let him get away with it. He locks the door and pulls out his drill, pressing it to the boy's cheek. Outside the shop, we hear blood-curdling screams. Yuma finishes up the story and then gets back to his homework where he gets a perfect score on the practice test. Story 13. Normal household. The next day, Yuma shows how he scored 100% on the real test and is pretty pleased with himself. In the story, a father wakes up in the morning and talks about how he has the perfect life with a beautiful wife and honest student daughter. He grew up with relatives and all he wanted as a kid was to have a normal family. He says good morning to his daughter, but she just ignores him. He then demands his breakfast and his wife scrambles to get it ready. She finally places it down and the father is disgusted to see it's fish, saying he's grown to hate this meal. His daughter continues ignoring him and gets up to go to the bathroom when he fully snaps, raising a hand like he's about to hit her. She's frozen with fear, but her mother tells him to stop. He then demands that she at least apologize and slams his fist on the table. Like a child, he just repeatedly asks her to apologize over and over, and his erratic behavior is really unsettling. Finally, his wife says that something is wrong with him and that they've been meaning to talk about it, but he can't keep hitting them because they don't do exactly as he says. They're not his servants. She then asks for him to leave the house. This sets him off and he screams at them that he bought this house and that they can be the ones to leave. In fact, they shouldn't take anything either as it's all bought with his money. He even goes so far as to call them his playthings. Strangely, the daughter starts laughing and says, "See, Mom, we were right all along." Her mother says, "Yeah, I guess we were, though I feel a little guilty. I'd hoped we could have talked this out before it came to this." Like us, the father is really confused, and then he suddenly spits out blood and starts coughing violently on the floor. The wife gladly says she poisoned his food, but he points out that he never ate it. Well, here's where it gets weird. She says she poisoned his fish yesterday, and he should have been dead by nightfall. But instead, he keeps showing up again and again, coming and going like nothing's wrong. His daughter yells at him to finally die. He can't stay in this house forever. They tell him to open the bathroom door and look inside, but he refuses. So finally, his wife opens it. Inside is the father's dead, rotting corpse. It seems the poison finally kicked in while he was on the John, and he's been dead this whole time. The man they've been talking to is his ghost. The story ends, and someone comes to Yuma's door asking how he did on the test. Yuma says he got 100 points and holds up the test when a hand reaches in. Yuma flinches, but the hand simply ruffles his hair and leaves. At this point, there's definitely some weird shit going on, but it's all been way too vague to tell. Does he have a ghost in his house? Maybe an abusive parent? I have no idea.
Now at Whataburger, you can get the new Big Ranch Wrap for $3, 5 premium wadded chicken bites for $4, or bacon cheese Whataburger Jr. for $5. Add fries and a drink for a little more. Now that's a what a deal at What a Burger. Download the app.
Story 14, Good Morning. The chapter opens with Yuma talking to someone in his room, though they're obscured by the stuffed animal. It turns out to be Hina, and Yuma says he wants to hear more of the ghost stories she told him at school. He looks over at his desk and says, let's go ahead with the 13th story, which confuses Hina, but she shrugs it off and starts to tell it. This one is pretty short. A student seems distressed about his classmate Kaneko greeting everyone as they enter the classroom. That's because Kaneko died a week ago, and he seems to be the only one who can see her ghost. As a punishment, Kaneko was instructed by the teacher to greet every student as they entered the class until she got someone to greet her back. But the kids thought it was funny not to respond to her at all. Still, she felt it her duty to do it every day. Then one day she was hit by a car and killed. Now her ghost hasn't been able to move on. Finally, the student greets her back, weirding out the rest of the class who don't see her, but it seems her spirit can now move on. After finishing the story, Hina says she'd like to hear one from Yuma, and he says that he'll tell her one tomorrow. He says she can come over whenever she likes, but she needs to ask permission first. From who, she wonders. But before Yuma answers, the 5 o'clock chime goes off, and he says she needs to leave. Story 15. Mirror image. Yuma has built a paper frog and is having fun making it hop. His expression changes suddenly and he says that they don't have time to be messing around. Let's get started on the 15th story. Ryu and his friend are hanging out in the bathroom at school when his friend looks in the mirror and wonders how the mirror versions of them feel. We move however we want and the mirror people have to obey us. Makes you wonder if they're envious of us for being on this side of the mirror. Ryu laughs it off, but later that night, looking at his reflection, he can't help but think about it. He even talks to his reflection for a minute before deciding he's acting silly and leaves the bathroom. However, his reflection seems to have a sinister face. He then walks by the mirror in his bedroom and thinks he sees something odd from the corner of his eye. He turns to look at his stand-up mirror and finds his reflection making a horrifying deformed face at him. In fear, Ryu throws the mirror to the ground. But in the shattered glass, his reflection looks at him with a ghoulish face. He runs downstairs but can't avoid all the reflections around the room that are all looking at him. He tries to calm himself down when he gets a call from his friend. However, as he looks at the surface of his phone, he once again sees that horrid face looking back at him. The next morning, Ryu's father comes out of his room to find him sitting in the hallway corner where there are no reflections. Ryu tries to tell his father what's happened and how his reflection won't stop looking at him. He sounds crazy, of course, and his father suggests maybe the mirror looks like that because of the face you're making. We see Ryu's unhinged face, which is pretty scary, honestly. At that moment, Ryu sees his own reflection in his father's eyes and runs away screaming. He slips on the stairs, however, breaking his ankle and tumbling to the bottom with a sickening snap. His father looks down to see Ryu dead, with a pool of blood around his head. In the blood, we can see his reflection, smiling. Yuma ends the story and thinks he hears a noise. Then there's a loud thump outside the door, and he quickly hides under his covers and turns the lights off. Once again, the door swings open, and we see only black. This time, a shadowy figure appears and walks toward his desk. It reaches out. There's a loud noise, and the screen goes black. Okay, well that confirms that something strange is definitely going on. It seems like a supernatural entity, but at the same time the lights are off, so maybe it's just Yuma's father covered in shadows. Either way, it gives me the heebie-jeebies. Story 16, Online Dating. Yuma finds his paper frog completely destroyed on his desk and starts to cry as he shovels it into a trash bin. Then he starts the 16th story. A woman's relationship with her boyfriend is on the rocks. He scolds her for being lazy while he heads off for work. She decides to try online dating to snag a new boyfriend before they inevitably break up. She matches with a guy named Shun, and they seem to hit it off, constantly texting each other, though he hasn't shown what he looks like. One day, Shun thinks it would be fun to tell each other ghost stories. His story is about an unhappy man who had 3 previous girlfriends that all broke up with him and ghosted him. It wasn't the fact they broke up with him that made the man sad. It was that they all were dating other men behind his back first. Ever since then, whenever the man was longing to meet the women he had dated, he went to the mountains to see them. Shun ends the story by saying he is that man. Pretty creepy, and what's with that in him? Shun reminds her it's just a ghost story, but still the woman is pretty freaked out and stops talking to him. A few days later, while at the grocery store, the woman gets a message from Shun asking why she stopped replying. He then says he's going to meet her face to face, seeing that she's in range. Startled, the woman sees there's a spot on the app that shows your match's range. Well, that's a creepy feature. Anyway, Shun is only 300 meters away. The woman breaks into a cold sweat and drops her groceries running out of the store. All the while, Shun is getting closer and closer, and she's terrified he could be any guy she's passing. Stopping to catch her breath, a large hand grabs her shoulder, and she turns to see a large, sweaty man looking at her. She screams and runs away, but the guy was only trying to give her her handkerchief, which she dropped. Making it back to her apartment, she locks the door, but when she looks at her phone, she sees that Shun is only 10 meters away. Footsteps are heard just outside, and the door is slowly unlocked and open. But it's just the woman's actual boyfriend, looking puzzled by her stunned appearance. He lets out a sigh of relief and gets another message from Shun. He says, "At least see what I look like, and then decide to go out with me," and sends her his social media profile. She opens it and is surprised to see her actual boyfriend, Kyosuke's profile. As she stares at her phone confused, we see her boyfriend behind her holding his phone and staring at her. I can't tell if her boyfriend knew it was her the whole time or not. He looked confused in the final panel. But if you look at his bag, he seems to have rope and some other suspicious items. I think when he said he met the girls he dated up the mountain, he meant their buried corpses. The story ends, and with tears in his eyes, Yuma starts putting books back on the shelf that clearly fell, I guess due to the entity in the room last night. And one of his parents tells him to quiet down, it's too early to be loud. Story 17, the boy who was thrown away. One of Yuma's parents yells at him through the door, asking if he's going to lay in bed all day, and says that this child needs to be taught a lesson. He sits at his desk and tells the next story. This one is maybe the strangest so far, and definitely messed up. It begins with a mother throwing her young child in a garbage can, saying, "Bad children like you belong in the trash." She shoves him in deeper and jams the lid down despite the whole screaming that it hurts. His feet and arms are all smashed in as he cries in the dark. She yells at him to shut up and puts a heavy box on top so he can't get out. Once she leaves, he cries out in agony, feeling the trash against his skin and a cockroach crawling on his face. Later, his mother comes back drunk and opens the trash, only to dump her empty beer cans on top of her son. The kid wonders how his own mother could treat him so terribly. It's been so torturous that he can't even cry anymore. Is he just trash to her? As he says this, the boy's face seems to almost change, partly into a plastic bag, like he's actually becoming trash. His finger is broken and feet bent. He describes the awful hell he's in, how it itches and burns. It's cold and dark, and he's so lonely. The next day, the mom walks out and almost seems surprised when she remembers what she did. It's unclear to me whether she meant to kill him or not, but either way, she's even more surprised to hear him moving around inside. She opens it and looks mortified at what she sees, as the boy's distorted face comes out, smiling, with a flurry of crooked arms and legs reaching for her. We see blood splatter, and it ends there. Yuma closes out the story by asking what you would do in a situation like that. When children are put into positions like that, are they completely powerless? He's interrupted by one of his parents yelling at him again, asking if he's still in his pajamas. They then say if he wants to be lazy, he can stay in here all day, and they slam the door. Okay, well, this confirms that one or both of his parents are abusive, at the very least verbally, but there's been some heavy implications there's physical abuse as well. So maybe there is no ghost. Maybe poor Yuma is just in a real-life nightmare.
Guys, Leland here with Bedrock Pools, Nashville. While we really specialize in pools, we've also learned that a lot of our clients want total outdoor living. That includes anything from retaining walls, sport courts, fun greens, fencing, the whole entire thing wrapped into one for a total outdoor experience. This area at home, kind of on the side yard, the client really didn't want to keep up with the grass and maintain it. The kids here are athletes, they wanted some stuff to do, have fun with friends. So, did a putting green here with a full putting turf. This can be adjusted to the speed based off the amount of sand we use. Here we have a more sport lawn turf, which is fine for playing, dogs, kids, anything you want to do. We filled this big large area here with a sport court. It's dual basketball and pickleball coated court. So a lot of people ask about turf cost. Every job's a little different based off accessibility for machines and trucks and getting the workforce to and from a job, excavating material, bringing new material in. But the biggest thing about turf is, although the expense up front may be a little more than you think over regular grass, which is true, you're saving lawn control, weed control, no aerating, overseeding, no mowing, no irrigation, keeping the mud down, always having a nice clean place for your family and pets to play. So depending on your application, the break even for turf as opposed to regular sod and manicured lawns, we're talking about 5 to 10 year break even and getting your money worth right now. So speaking about artificial turf, here we go. What a great space. This client had this huge backyard, active kids, active family, really wanted a space they could play baseball, football, soccer, have parties, anything you want to do back here. This space is probably about 12,000 square feet, and it is utilized all the time for fun activities. So as you know, not every lot in Middle Tennessee is flat. A lot of times as we're building pools, we have to really focus on getting water away from pools and drainage. It's a key element to keeping your backyard safe and functional. This particular lawn here had a smoke all the way down the whole perimeter. What we did was flatten that out, cut it, built a very static retaining wall, hold it back, create a nice flat space, and keep the water away from the pool. Thanks for checking out our page today. Although Bedrock specializes in pools, hope you've also seen we have a lot of other things we do that can really enhance your property. Putting greens, sport courts, fencing, all the things we can do outside. When you're ready, fill out the form, click the link. We have to meet with you.
Two great revolutions reshaped the world in the last quarter of the 18th century, the American Revolution and the French Revolution. One gave birth to the most successful.
Story 18. Clean Gum. Yuma is looking out his window into the dead of night when he assures us not to worry. He'll take his time with it. The story starts with a strange panel of a guy obnoxiously chewing gum. His name is Yamada, and his coworker Shiki asks about the gum that he's been chewing lately. Yamada tells him something bizarre. Chewing this gum will let you relive any memory you want. He asks Shiki to think of a memory he'd want to relive and write it down on a strip of gum before chewing it. Shiki goes along with this for the sake of amusement, but once the gum enters his mouth, he's suddenly taken back to the moment he proposed to his wife, fully reliving it as if he's actually there. His wife says yes, and they cry tears of joy, but soon she fades from his arms and everything goes blank. He snaps back to reality in the break room and says it's gone, but doesn't know what is gone exactly. Yamada then informs him that as the flavor of the gum fades, so does the memory. And the really messed up part is that you can never recall that memory again. Shiki is rightfully pissed. Why did Yamada tell him that before he ate the gum? But he figured Shiki wouldn't believe him otherwise. There's a sad moment where Shiki feels like he's lost a really important memory, but he doesn't know what it is. He asks Yamada where he got the gum in the first place, but he says he chewed that memory away as well. Yamada hates his job here. It figures at the very least they can relive some cherished memories. Suddenly, Shiki is hit with an idea. Why does it have to be good memories? There's plenty of bad memories he'd love to get rid of. He frantically jots down several terrible memories and shoves multiple pieces of gum in his mouth at once, despite Yamada's warnings. Shiki is hit with several terrible moments all at the same time. His boss breaking a bottle over his head and chastising him, and his wife calling him a liar and holding a kitchen knife. It's unclear if she's going to divorce him or attack him in this memory, but in reality, Shiki looks completely unhinged as he chomps on all the gum and his face sags. It's scary for sure. But after a moment, he's all smiles, saying, "This gum is awesome." He feels like a big weight has been lifted off of him. Yamada says if he really wants to, he can take the rest of it. He only has a couple of good memories left, and he's saving those to chew on for when he dies. You can then see his last will and testament sticking out of his bag, and it's clear that he plans on ending his own life. Shiki says, why would you want to do that when you can chew all your pain away? Yamada, like a drug addict, says he's right, it's too late to stop now, and grabs another piece. Outside the break room, we can hear Shiki's screams and Yamada's laughter. After the story, Yuma climbs partly out of his window like he's gonna jump, when someone tells him to shut the window before the bugs get in. So he closes it and goes to bed. Story 19, Hashaku-sama. Before Yuma starts the story, he pulls a test out of his bag, and we can see that he's done poorly. He shoves it back in, looking worried, and then begins the tale. The story starts ominously enough with a tall woman looking over a schoolyard fence. A boy notices she's dropped her hat and kindly walks over to hand it to her. Once he does, the woman lets out a strange laugh and grabs his face with her oversized hands. His classmates tell him to get away from there, and she vanishes. They then tell him the story of Hashaku-sama, a monster in the form of an insanely tall woman who has a weird laugh and can mimic others' voices. They say if Hashaku-sama takes a liking to you, she'll haunt you till you die. The boy argues that she wasn't that tall, but they remind him that on the other side of that fence is a steep slope, nearly 2 meters to the ground. Class starts and the kid is sufficiently scared. Outside, the rain picks up, and amongst the raindrops, he starts hearing something that reminds him of the woman's weird laugh. The laugh becomes more and more pronounced until finally, he asks if he can go to the nurse's office. The teacher asks if he needs someone to go with him, but before the boy can say yes, he hears his own voice reply, "No, I'm fine." The teacher shuts the door, and the kid makes his way through the eerie dark halls, all the while hearing the laughter and seeing tall shadows outside the window. When he finally makes it to the nurse's office, he asks if he can go home, but soon the voice of another child comes from the hall. The nurse goes to take a look, and the kid sits scared in the hospital bed behind the curtain. The nurse's voice begins speaking to him, calling him a bad boy. And we can see a menacing eye leaning way up over the curtain. Suddenly, the real nurse walks in, and there's a struggle we can only see via silhouette. sweat through the curtains. An unnaturally tall figure picks the nurse up and seems to snap her in half at the middle. A long, bloody hand reaches over the curtain and into the boy's mouth. In the final panel, Hashaku-sama, with her long fingers in the kid's mouth, says, "Now I know you'll never forget me." What the hell? Yuma closes the story and we finally see his mother enter the room. She asks how he did on the test and Yuma pretends he doesn't know what she's talking about, but she ignores him and pulls it out of his bag. The woman tears up the test and as Yuma apologizes, she smacks him across the face. That's where this chapter ends and we have a much better understanding as to what's going on now. It seems Yuma's mother is definitely abusive, and this might be what led to Yuma wanting to die in the first place. Story 20, Dangerous Neighbor. As Yuma studies, we can see his mother watching him from the doorway, but when he turns around, she's gone, and he begins the story. The man comes home to his apartment to find a note on his door calling him an asshole and telling him to leave. It seems this isn't the first time, and we can see his neighbor, a young woman, watching from her door. Later, he leaves to take his trash out and finds another note insulting him. He tears it up when the girl next door confronts him, saying these notes are because of her. She asks to come in, where she explains that it's not her leaving the notes, but her stalker. She's gone to the police, but hasn't had any luck. The stalker actually harassed the previous tenant until they left and this guy moved in. He empathizes with her and says that he's sorry she has to deal with all that, offering to walk her home anytime she'd like. She's overwhelmed by his kindness and takes him up on the offer. Of course, the notes keep appearing day after day and are more and more severe. One day after walking the girl home, there's no note on the door. Instead, he finds it on the inside of his apartment. Of course, this sends the man into a panic, and the woman offers to let him stay with her for the night. There's some heavy flirtation, and the next day, it's pretty clear that they had sex. The man leaves her apartment for a minute and walks over to his, where he pulls a note out of his own pocket and tapes it to the door. He calls for his neighbor to see it, and then says maybe he should stay with her a little longer. Yep, this guy is the stalker, and this was all a clever ruse to get with her. As Yuma ends the story, his mother comes in pissed off that he's not studying and starts to slap him when suddenly the door to his room slams shut and the screen goes fuzzy. When the picture clears, we see his mother's hand has been stabbed with a pencil and the chapter ends there. Okay, so it seems there may be something supernatural going on after all. Maybe Yuma has been telling the stories with plans to get help from a ghost to deal with his mother. Story 21, Smothered in Dust. Yuma comes rushing in out of breath and starts to talk about what happened yesterday, but says never mind and instead tells another ghost story. A man has been non-stop cleaning his apartment, but there's still dust everywhere. This never happened before, and then suddenly last week, dust started accumulating like crazy. The only odd thing that happened last week was meeting the old man who moved in upstairs. He said he lives alone, and it's nice to know someone will be there to notice him when he finally kicks the bucket. Kind of a sad thing to say. The man keeps cleaning, but is still finding dust. He tries to drink some water, and there's dust floating in it. His toothbrush is covered with the stuff, and when he yells out frustrated, the dust starts collecting in his teeth. Yuck. He starts searching online for sources of dust buildup. Of course, there's plenty of answers, but one does catch his eye: skin fragments. After spending the day deep cleaning, he feels like he's finally put a dent in it, but he wakes up in the night to dust falling from above and filling his mouth. His room is now covered like snow, and he looks closer at a clump of dust. It's full of tiny, wriggling worms. Disgusting. He's had enough and tries to leave, but it seems his door is jammed from dust buildup. He looks up at the ceiling and sees the dust accumulating in the shape of a body and what looks like the face of the old man. He recalls the last part of the conversation he had with the man when he said he's glad someone will notice him when he kicks the bucket. He'll just have to think of a sign. We get a closer look at the disturbing face formed of dust and worms and the man looking up in terror. After the story, Yuma mentions what happened yesterday again, saying that the pencil, it sure looked like it hurt. He stops and looks back where we can hear someone crying out from the hall in pain. Yuma says it hurt for him too. Story 22. Pretend not to notice. Yuma says it's Friday and he'll be here soon, so let's get going with the story. I wonder who he is. Anyway, a little boy and his mother are walking down the street when they pass a strange humanoid creature. The boy says that ever since he was little, he's seen grotesque monsters that no one else could see. He learned that his grandmother could also see these monsters, and she told him the best way to deal with them is to pretend that they're not there. These things were never human, and paying attention to them gives them strength. The monsters stand around them staring, but slowly they fade away. Following his grandma's advice, the boy grows up, and though he sees the creatures regularly, ignoring them does the trick. Now a teenager, the kid takes a girl to the movies when he's annoyed about the tall person blocking his view. His girlfriend has no idea what he's talking about, and he realizes too late that it's one of the creatures, and he just gave it some attention. It looks like a huge woman with a stretched out body, and it suddenly rips its own head off. He runs out of the theater to his grandma's house, which is filled with the creatures. She calms him down, and they slowly disappear once again. Eventually, his grandmother died, and while mourning his loss, one of the creatures appears, wearing the grandma's face. For a moment, he's excited, and then realizes it's a trick, and the creature rips his grandma's face in half. He looks away at first, but then, enraged, he starts to attack the creature. Of course, this interaction only draws more creatures in, and soon he's surrounded. Yuma turns the lights out and runs towards the bed, but is stopped by the shadowy figure from before, who grabs him and yells at him, "You hurt your stepmother, didn't you?" He demands that Yuma apologize as he grabs him by the neck and drags the boy out of the room. Okay, well, this gives us a lot more information. It seems the shadow is not a ghost, but Yuma's father, and the woman is actually his stepmom. It's sad to think that Yuma being so scared in his house isn't because of the supernatural, but rather his terrifying, abusive father. Story 23. Merry-Go-Round. Yuma sits silently for a moment, and we can see bruises all over his arms. Then he starts the next story. A father and his young girl stop by a carousel where she asks for one last ride. He tells her it's okay, and so excited, she runs to climb up on a horse, but slips. Though we don't see what happens, we can hear a terrible bang, and it seems that the fall was fatal. It jumps ahead a little, and we now see the father in mourning and drinking heavily. Finally, he decides to pay his respects to his daughter by leaving flowers at the carousel, which is now out of commission. When he arrives, he notices something strange, one of the horses crumbling. He walks onto the platform when it starts spinning and eerie music plays. For a moment, he thinks he sees his daughter running amongst the horses, and it starts spinning faster. Soon, he sees the dark shadow of his daughter riding a horse, and with a demented face, she tells him to get out. He apologizes to her for being careless and letting her die that day. But soon, the faces of the horses morph into unsettling humanoid shapes, and they all shout at him to get out. He then trips on a crack and tumbles off the platform, landing against the railing as the entire thing collapses. A maintenance worker sees him and pulls him out, saying he's lucky he didn't just die. This thing has been on the brink of collapse for a while now. Looking at the wreckage, the father realizes his daughter was just trying to save his life. As Yuma finishes the story, his mother peeks into the room, wondering why he's talking to himself. He walks toward her and apologizes for stabbing her hand, but she just screams at him to stay away. She then seemingly talks to her husband, telling him that something is wrong with the boy, and that she believes something's in there with him. Yuma simply smiles and says goodnight.
The Tempur-Pedic breeze makes sleep feel cool, so no more sweating the lamp or blasting the air conditioner, because the Tempur breeze feels up to 10 degrees cooler all night long. Find cooler sleep with the Tempur breeze collection at an Astral near you.
From Entertainment Nashville and the Party Bus, your one-stop shop for all your entertainment, party rental, and transportation needs, big or small. From Entertainment Nashville and the Party Bus is your source for the best party equipment rentals, party buses, limos, live entertainment, and so much more.
Story 24. beneath the mask. For the first time, Yuma tells the ghost story from a different location. He says, "Thank God they didn't find you," and it seems he's now set up in the closet. A woman named Momoko takes the same route home after work every day. She walks through the rain and passes a strange woman sat with her head down. As she passes, the woman rapidly approaches her and is wearing a creepy face mask. She claims to be Kokomo's mother and calls her by name. It does sound like her, though her voice is muffled from the mask, but what a strange circumstance to find her in. Well, the woman says that some kids played a prank on her, asking her to wear this mask that actually had glue on the inside, and now it's stuck to her face. Kokomo's pretty suspicious about the whole thing. Why didn't she call someone or head straight home? The woman says she left her phone at the house, and without her glasses, she can't get very far. Kokomo also notices her shoes are missing, and the woman claims they fell off as she climbed the cliffside nearby. It's all very suspicious. Well, Kokomo offers to walk her home, but is completely thrown off when the woman thanks her and says she's just like her father. Kokomo is nothing like her father and demands that the woman say her father's name. Now she really starts to question the whole thing. Who is this woman? The woman grabs her and tells her to calm down, but Kokomo is starting to freak out, noticing how wrinkly and veiny the woman's hands are. Her mother's hands aren't like that, are they? Finally, she starts trying to pull the mask off to see if it really is her mom, and the woman is clearly in pain. She trips and goes falling off the side of the cliff. Kokomo looks down and doesn't see anything, and gets the idea that she can just call her mother's phone. Her father picks up and confirms that her mom did leave the phone here. He asks if Kokomo knows where she's gone to, and at the bottom of the cliff, we see her dead mother bleeding out from the mask. As the story finishes, Yuma's mom opens the closet door and drops some food on the floor before slamming it. Seems that this is some kind of punishment. Story 25. The Boastful Old Woman. Outside the closet, Yuma hears the doorbell ring and footsteps move across the house. This buys him some time to tell the next story. A little boy and girl walk home from school when they pass a really creepy old lady outside her house in a wheelchair. Her eyes and mouth are all blacked out. I can't tell if it's because she's missing her eyes and teeth or her wrinkly skin just obscures them. The boy tells the girl not to pay attention to her. She just sits there all day waiting for people to talk to her. The old lady hears them and says she doesn't just sit here all day. In fact, every day she goes wherever she wants, insisting that she even went to Mount Fiji yesterday. The girl argues that's impossible, and the boy tells her not to engage with the lady and that there are rumors that she kidnaps kids. They start walking away when the old woman starts listing items: a heart-shaped clock, a white teddy bear, and star-patterned curtains. These all happen to be features of the little girl's room. Freaked out, she asks how the old woman knows about that stuff, and the lady says she followed her home the other day. The little girl yells at her that she's making this all up. There's no way she could have done that in her condition, but the old woman reveals how. She says she uses astral projection, a technique to remove the soul from the body. You can then travel wherever you want. That night, the girl tries it herself, and remarkably, it works. Her soul leaves her body, and she flies to the old woman's house to tell her that she's done it. Here she finds the old woman is outside of her body as well, and she's surprised. None of the other children she's told have been able to do this. They go back to the girl's room to look at her body, and the old woman tells the girl she should have never left her body out in the open like this. Otherwise, someone could steal it. As she says this, she reaches into the girl's body, and her spirit seems to fuse with it. The next day, the little girl and boy are walking to school when they pass the old woman, who looks at the girl and sadly says, "Give it back." The little girl tells the boy she's just an old liar, and they walk away smiling. It seems the old woman has snatched the little girl's body, forcing the little girl to live in an old, dying body. The story ends, and the doorbell rings several more times until finally Yuma's stepmom answers it. It looks like Hina stopped by to drop off some homework for Yuma, and hearing her voice, Yuma yells out and starts clawing and pounding on the closet door. Hina clearly hears him calling out, and his mother, playing it off, says she'll go get him. And that is the end of chapter 25. Well guys, that's the first 25 stories, and that's where I'm going to have to stop for today. But don't worry, I'll be going through the rest soon. What do you guys think of this series, and what story do you find actually scary or particularly interesting? I really thought the Dangerous Neighbor story was great because it was pretty clever, and maybe it was obvious, but I didn't actually see the twist coming. The fight story was great as well. The idea of talking to someone friends, this is Brief speaking. Today we're diving back into 100 ghost stories that will lead to my own death. We did the first 25 last week, and if you missed that video, no sweat. This is an anthology series, and so every ghost story stands on its own. There is a subtle story going on in between concerning a boy named Yuma and his abusive parents. I'll do a short recap of Yuma's story, but then we'll pick up right where we left off. This is 100 ghost stories that will lead to my own death, part 2. In the first 25 stories, we met Yuma, a troubled boy who almost jumps out of a window when his friend Hina stalls him by telling him about the 100 ghost story, and how if you tell all 100, a real ghost will be summoned. Yuma finds this fascinating and begins telling the stories. He seems to be talking directly to the reader, but I suspect this to be a camera or more likely some important object. As he tells the stories, we learn that Yuma has abusive parents. His stepmom is constantly verbally insulting him, and his dad is straight up scary, often physically attacking him. The more stories Yuma tells, the more strange, supernatural things begin to happen, and Yuma alludes to a presence being in the house. At one point, in self-defense from his stepmom, Yuma stabs her in the hand with a pencil. This was followed by severe punishment, including being locked in a closet, and in the last chapter, Hina stopped by to give Yuma his homework, unknowingly forcing his mom to let him out. That's really it so far, and it doesn't seem like a lot, but that's because Yuma's story is told in only a couple of pages here and there between the ghost stories. It keeps you reading though, as you really want to know what the hell's going on in Yuma's house. Anyway, let's get to the rest of the stories. Story 26, Scrounging Up Change. After school, Yuma and Hina come back to Yuma's room, and she's surprised that he invited her this time. Usually it's the other way around. He requests another ghost story from her, which leads us to the 26th story. We see a kid scrounging around under a vending machine. A coin is just out of his reach when a stick comes in from the other side and pushes it out. Looks like this was the boy's best friend, and they spend a lot of their time looking under machines like this for loose change. Today they're not getting a very good haul, and the kid with the stick scrapes it around in vain. He manages to pull something out, and the kids are shocked to see a 1,000 yen note, a much bigger prize than what they typically find. This rejuvenates their search, and they desperately look around for anything else they can find. One of the boys says he's been saving up his money for a soccer ball, then he's going to practice hard and become a pro to make real money. The other kid says he already spent all of his half on food. It's pretty sad, actually. He says his dad works all day and is never home. There used to be food in the fridge, but it eventually ran out. His friend feels bad and says that they'll search extra hard tomorrow. The next day, they get another pretty good haul when the starving boy says that his friend should take all of it. He'll just spend it all immediately. But his friend can get the soccer ball and he'll have that forever. He insists that he buy the ball, and so they make a deal to share it. A week goes by, and we see many flowers outside of the starving boy's home. His friend sees him scrounging under the vending machine like usual and is happy to find him, since everyone else has been saying he's dead. The kid just ignores him and then crawls under the machine completely in an unnatural way, repeatedly saying the phrase, "I can't get it." Then he slowly pops out of the other side with a cringe-inducing scraping noise. His friend is pretty shocked at what he saw, but tries to show his friend the new soccer ball that he just bought, and even hands it to him. However, it just drops right through the boy's hands. It seems the boy ended up starving to death, and his ghost is stuck scrounging for change endlessly. Pretty sad. After the story, Yuma thanks Hina for coming by yesterday, saying she really saved his skin. There's a loud knock on the door, and Yuma's stepmom has brought them a snack. Story 27, Transfiguration. Yuma walks into his room to find his stepmom spraying some cleaner. She coldly says that she cleaned his room, and we can see her hand is still bandaged from the pencil incident. Once she leaves, Yuma is relieved to see the camera, or whatever he's talking to, is still there and begins the next story. A man named Naoya rolls out of bed and soon tells the woman he was sleeping with to get out, since his actual girlfriend is coming over. She's understandably pissed and storms out, slamming the door behind her. Just as she leaves, Naoya sees something strange in the hallway, a very faint, dark shadow. The doorbell rings and his girlfriend Miho comes in, who he greets with a smile, as if he wasn't just banging some other chick in here. He asks her if she sees the black cloud in the hallway, and she has no idea what he's talking about. After a short visit, Miho says she can't sleep over because she's got to get up early. Just before she leaves, Naoya sees the cloud again, and now it's a little darker and has taken on the vague shape of a human. He grabs Miho and turns her around to look at it, but once again, she doesn't see anything and leaves, walking right past it. Naoya is sufficiently freaked out now and wonders if he's hallucinating. Some time passes and he peeks out into the hall to see the shape has gotten clearer, and now the feet and hands of a person have formed. It seems to be a woman, and hair is draped over her face. The figure cranes her neck and looks up at him. Her hair parts, and we see she has no face. Naoyo freaks out and shuts himself in his room. He calls up Miho and tells her that he needs to move immediately. Apparently, she was the one who rented the place to him, and he asks if anyone died in here before he moved in. She completely ignores his scared ramblings and bluntly asks him if he's hiding something from her. What is he been doing in the room she's renting him? She says she knew something was up at her visit yesterday and needs time to think about things. Then she hangs up on him. Desperate, Naoyo then calls up his side piece and asks if he can crash at her place tonight. She's still pissed about the way he kicked her out, but he says it's an emergency and explains the whole ghost situation going on in the hallway. She tells him that the dark figure is actually her wrath incarnate, all the anger she feels for him given form. Just then, his room door begins to open and he completely flips out. The girl says she was just kidding and he was the one who started the ghost story. While she laughs it off, Naoyo looks mortified. The ghostly woman has entered his room and is reaching out toward him. He finally sees her face, and it's Miho. It seems this is Wrath Incarnate, but of his girlfriend for cheating on her. She wraps her hands around his neck, and the story ends with a squeezing sound. Yuma then looks around his room. He panics and starts frantically searching for something that seems to have gone missing. He runs out of his room, and we hear his mother saying, "What, that stuffed animal of yours? I threw that thing out." Well, that's messed up. She actually threw away Umiken. Story 28. Can't you see her? Yuma is shaking and crying until he finally sits down at his desk, clutching a pencil. He says it doesn't matter what he does, it doesn't change a thing. Then he begins the story. A man named Hashaku-sama sits at his wife's side as she passes away in the hospital. He cries out in tears, begging her not to leave him. We jump ahead a bit, and Hashaku-sama wakes up from his bed to the doorbell ringing. Oddly, his wife still seems to be alive, but under the covers, she asks him to grab the door. It turns out to be a psychic medium he hired named Higawa. He sits her down and pours some tea when Higawa's eyes go wide looking at the teacup. Though we don't see why, and she quickly moves on, asking for more details about his situation. He tells her that his wife, Shizuka, had a chronic illness, and 2 years ago she died in the hospital. He could hardly bear it, living completely alone and looking over at her empty bedside. One night he couldn't take it anymore and stuffed the blanket with pillows, pretending she was still there. For the first time in a while, he slept like a baby. After that, he kept living this way, pretending she was still there and even setting the table for two. Then, one night, Shizuka spoke to him, telling him good night. Day by day, she spoke more and more until finally she took shape and started to move. Hashaku-sama thought it was all in his head, but then she started singing songs he'd never heard before and making meals he'd never eaten. He says to the medium, "This is way beyond the bounds of delusion, right?" He believes his desire was so strong, he actually brought her back to life. He called up Ikawa because he knew a medium of her caliber would be able to see Shizuka. He then walks over to the bedroom door and opens it, where his beautiful wife steps out and introduces herself. Ikawa just stares blankly for a moment and then says she doesn't see anyone, and in fact, doesn't feel any supernatural energy coming from this place. She tells him bluntly that he's living a fantasy and just seeing what he wants to see. She starts to see herself out when Hashaku-sama asks her why she's lying. Furthermore, he can prove it. He notes that Hikawa never drank her tea, most likely because of the long dark hair that he put in it. Well, the hair belonged to Shizuka. How could she see the hair and not see the woman it belongs to? Shizuka then pulls a knife out on Hikawa, who's scared to death. The blade gets inches from her face, and finally, she pushes the ghost woman away, confirming that she does see her. Hashaku-sama starts thanking her for confirming the truth, that his wife has truly come back to life. Though, in one last panel, we see the reality. Hashaku-sama is alone and talking to himself. Not only is his wife not back, he made up Hikawa too. A cope within a cope. Yuma ends the story and his stepmom tells him to go to bed. He sadly asks about his horsey and she throws a doll for him to have instead. It's a shittier version of Umiken, and enraged he chucks it at the wall.
Project Domain is out there. Go to Wix and make it yours. Claim your space online. Own your name, your brand, your breakthrough. And the rest just clicks. It all starts with
uses a sharp pencil in his fist before starting the 29th story. This one starts on a pretty interesting page. A boy named Hiroto stares at a photo of himself sat upon his own memorial. I guess he recently died, and it's always nice to see one of these stories from the ghost perspective. Well, his parents are of course devastated, especially his mother, who can't stop crying. Hiroto seems at peace though and says he had a good life, however short. His father then lights some incense for him, and this has the opposite effect on the boy's ghost, who can't stand the stench. While Hiroto's father tries to get his wife to eat something, the ghost is freaking out about the incense and finally crushes it with his hand to put it out. His parents look over in shock, and his mother claims that his spirit must be angry. She firmly believes that Hiroto is still in this house and worries that he'll be stuck here forever. Finally, they decide to try and use some salt to sanctify the place. They both take a handful to throw around the room, unknowingly speckling their son's ghost in the process. Unfortunately, this also has a negative effect, as Hiroto's skin starts burning from the salt. It's pretty hard to look at. He screams out and grabs his face, bumping into the altar and knocking over some glass. His parents are fully convinced that his spirit is angry and can't find peace, and decide to hire a professional cleanser. Meanwhile, poor Hiroto is curled up on the ground, begging his parents to stop. Soon an exorcist comes to cleanse the place, and the burned Hiroto starts feeling wheezy. His parents pray that he rests in peace, but Hiroto begs them to stop the man, and soon he erupts in flames. He asks why they're sending him away. Stay here. And before fully